You are listening to the Eastern Conference Tuesday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. I'm Ross Levitan from Locked On Senators, alongside Mike DiStefano from Locked On Leafs, and it is past Labor Day, which means hockey season is almost here. Teams from around the National Hockey League will be meeting at rookie tournaments from Buffalo all across this great continent, and then it's time for training camp. But there are still some RFAs who don't have contracts. Mikey and I will discuss which ones have the most meaning to the teams, who has leverage in what situations, and what made the Buffalo Sabres so eager to sign Tage Thompson a full year ahead of him needing a new contract. We'll get into all that and more. This is the Locked On NHL podcast, your team every day.
Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making the Locked On NHL podcast your first listen on this Tuesday, September 6th. We are free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube, where the road to 1,000 continues. Please be a friend, tell a friend to subscribe to the Locked On NHL podcast on YouTube so you can help us hit that milestone before the puck drops on the 2022-23 season. Mikey, it's past Labor Day. I already said it. Are you starting to get the itch that hockey's right around the corner?
I am, because I saw junior hockey has started up. I saw I was just going on Twitter and saw the Ice Dogs were in junior action or preseason action. I'm like, what already? But here we are. So yeah, I'm really getting the itch. We're just under 2 weeks away from the start of training camp. So yeah, I'm totally stoked and ready to go. I think every time you get to about Labor Day-ish is when people start to really start thinking that hockey's coming quick. So can't come quick enough though, my guy.
Well, not only junior hockey, Mikey, the AJHL preseason is underway as well. We often hear the Brooks Bandits as a team to watch for. They've had
the junior league there, Ross.
Yeah, well, you're talking major junior with Niagara, but I'll give you that one. -1 for me on the first shift. We'll get to a player who was a -17 last year who just signed a new contract, but not yet, because I got to tell you, the score in the Brooks Bandits versus Wisconsin Lumberjacks game on September 1st. Do you know the score of this game?
I don't, but the Brooks Bandits are one of the best team out west, best, junior teams. So I'd imagine they absolutely wallop them.
If I tell you the shots were 56 for Brooks and 12 for Wisconsin, give me a score prediction.
11-1.
23-0. The Brooks Bandits win.
That's 23-0. I was going on a limb with 11-1. Holy cow, 23-0. Do you have the score clock?
Yeah, I've got it right here. I'll pull it up.
Who led in scoring? Did we have a couple of hat tricks and a 9-point game or something like that?
Yeah, we've got an all-time. We definitely have a future WHLer here in Aiden Fink. As we know, the WHL names are just all-time here. But the Brooks Bandits, they went 2 for 3 on the power play, Mikey. Other than that, it was all at even strength. 11 goals in the second period.
I mean, no one got a hat trick? Oh, never mind. 5 goals.
Yeah, 5 goals.
5 goals by Hudson Malinowski, potentially.
Oh, yeah. Saskatoon's finest, if I'm not mistaken. Yep, there you go. 4 games, 7 goals, 5 assists. How are you? All right, this is the Locked On NHL podcast, and we like having some fun. It's that time of year. We're going to get serious, and all of our hosts are serious about this upcoming season. You can follow each and every Locked On NHL podcast and the market that you prefer on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. Rasmus Sandin, still unsigned as an RFA defenseman for the Toronto Maple Leafs, former first-round pick. But the Ottawa Senators, as we do like to start each and every Battle of Ontario Tuesday edition, they've locked up their former first-round pick defenseman, another undersized guy in Eric Branstrom. I teased it there. He was -17 last season. No goals, 14 apples, but still a little potential, I guess. A 1-year, $900,000 deal. It seems like a pretty low risk, though, at the same time.
I mean, you got to be pretty upset with how the Brandstrom thing kind of turned out, because he was supposed to be like a big time prospect, top pairing ish, had that type of potential, and was the big main return in Mark Stone, and hasn't quite turned out. He hasn't turned into a regular NHLer yet. So, but it was like a cheap contract. I guess it's like,
Yeah.
hey, you get one more year, I guess, to figure it out, and then I guess we'll figure it out next season. But how do you feel about that deal, being a Sens guy?
Well, I mean, the irony is when the Sens have had, stones thrown at them, pardon the pun there for the return for Mark Stone, but it's always been about drafting too much about size, about grit, about, when they drafted Brady Tkachuk, they were leaving talent on the table. I mean, I would argue that now, but same with Tyler Boucher, same with Tyler Clevin. They have this prototype that everyone thinks the Senators want to be mean and tough and physical. But then they went out and traded for Eric Brandstrom, who's none of those things. So it's just so ironic that they finally go the direction of the Scott Wheelers and the guys who love those undersized, like fast mobile players. And then it doesn't work out. So it just, I mean, to that point, but you do see some upside from him. But when you're 5'9", you have to be so dynamic offensively to make up for no doubt. Like there was a game when it was the All-Canadian division and Lucic is in front of the net and Brandstrom's trying to push him out of the way. Like you just cannot do it. I know that they say, yeah, they've been small their whole lives. That's how they've played. They've learned how to defend. It's the National Hockey League. Like these guys, they're big, tough power forwards. So I have some trouble thinking that he's ever going to be a top 4 guy, but I do see a circumstance where he can be a bottom pair guy who's relied upon in those down a goal, down 2 goals in the third period. You can elevate his minutes. He does bring a little bit of flash from that standpoint, but he needs a big summer. I think that's where I'm at with Eric Brandstrom, but
absolutely,
he's making $200,000 less than Victor Mete made last year to sit in the press box for half the season. So from that standpoint, I'll give it to Pierre Dorion on the fact that he held firm, was basically like, here's your qualifying offer. If you don't want to be at camp, you're going to put yourself behind the 8 ball. You have arbitration rights next summer. The best play for you is to strap him up and prove to not only us, but to next year's arbitrator potentially that you deserve a $1 million+ contract. So I think it was smart of Brandstrom because after the COVID shortened season, like when they came to camp in January, he got COVID on the travel over. So he missed training camp, was behind the 8 ball, and he really just hasn't caught up since. The year before COVID, the year after he was acquired, that whole Belleville team was elite, and he was a part of it. So he's shown potential. He had 23 points in 27 games down there. But the NHL, it's tough when you're an undersized defenseman.
It's a different beast. Like there's all kinds of guys who are undersized defensemen who can thrive in the AHL. And then the second you get to the big leagues and you're facing off against talent that not only is just as fast as you, but just as smart as you, and also, have elite size, but will outsmart you. It's tough to adapt for some of those guys. Like if you're undersized, you definitely have to be, doing something else to stand out. And just not sure Brandstrom has anything that is considered plus outside of that. But yeah, we'll see what ends up happening with him. Like we're the Leafs are in a similar boat, Rasmus Sandin, where he's a few seasons removed from being a first round pick with some high upside, and last year some injuries kind of cut his season short, and just as he was starting to kind of show off some of his potential, but also he's a guy who's a little undersized and doesn't quite have maybe the mobility that most undersized defensemen need to have to thrive in the NHL. Very smart player, very cerebral player, type of guy who I think could eventually be like a PP2 type quarterback, but ultimately not sure if he's going to round out into a top 4 defenseman. But and the Leafs also sitting there and they need to sign him. He's one of those RFAs that they have not yet signed. There's a bit of a stalemate, and I'm thinking that it's getting to a point where he may do just what you're saying Brandstrom is smart for not doing and might not report to camp. And Toronto's been down this road a couple of times. William Nylander, Mitch Marner. Obviously, Sandin does not have the clout that those guys have, so that would be very risky, I think, if they were to do that. But we'll see what ends up happening there. But I don't think it would cost an arm and a leg. They signed Liljegren for $1.4 million times 2. I think they're hoping that Sandin takes a similar contract, and those guys can kind of be a third pair, type defensive responsibilities, and they can go from there. But right now, it's kind of been radio silence from Sandin's camp.
Yeah, 21 years old. It's crazy how young these kids are starting to hold out and really understand what they think their worth is. I wonder about what kind of advice they're getting from their agents at that point, because he seems to be in a pretty cushy situation there where they were putting him in some offensive situations too. I know it took an injury or two at the same time, but wasn't he getting some power play 2 time there as well?
He was. And then also they ended up bringing in, who they bring
Giordano,
in?
right?
Giordano. So it kind of took away some
Right.
of his responsibilities in a way. And then there's
if you're Sandin though, aren't you like, wow, I'm 20, I get the opportunity to learn from Mark Giordano and watch him? It's not like he went right up the press box.
You're also sitting there thinking, I'm 21 years old and it's my time to try and find my way, into the lineup on a regular basis. Yet they keep bringing in all these guys, and they just brought in Giordano, and now I don't have a spot in the lineup every day. He just wants an opportunity to play every day, and that spot's not really there for him. He's got to go out and earn it. He can earn it. He can get it. He kind of wants it given to him, which I don't really like. I would rather him have the mentality of, I'm going to sign this deal, go in and try and win myself a job, as opposed to, I want the job. But whatever. He can do whatever he wants, I suppose. It's his life, his contract to make, but we'll see what ends up happening. Like I said, training camp starts up next week. It's one of the battles, kind of. There's 6 defensemen that are currently signed in Toronto. If he signs, that's 7 NHL defensemen, not including Jordy Ben or Victor Mete. So there's going to be some competition for, that third pair, defensive role in Toronto.
Very interesting. For more, go check out Locked On Leafs wherever you download your podcasts and on YouTube. And for more reaction on the Eric Brandstrom signing and a very special guest coming on Friday. You know what? I will initially tease it here. Pierre Dorion, Senators general manager, will be joining Locked On Senators on Friday. So you can go check that out wherever you get your podcast. And if I was Eric Brandstrom or Rasmus Sandin, I'd be all over the Built Puffs from Built Bar to try to add a little muscle heading in to the upcoming season. If you haven't tried the Built Bar Puffs yet, you're actually depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. Pause. And guess what? There's a new flavor. Ready? Delicious, indulgent cookie dough. Cookie dough chunk. Covered in chocolate. That's right. Built's done it again. Let me introduce you to cookie dough chunk puffs. 100% real chocolate, light and chewy texture, real cookie doughs, unreal. All the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassles of making it. Plus, it's healthy. At only 160 calories, they still cram in 15 grams of protein. So don't walk, run to Built.com and snag a box for yourself. You really need to do it, because what's great about Built is that all their bars are made with collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently, and it provides a ton of health benefit. Eat something that tastes good and is good for you too. You're going to love the new cookie dough chunk puff. Whether you have to get a snack for your workout, a late night treat, or just grab a quick bite, Built is the perfect protein bar for you. And it tastes better than a candy bar. So ditch the calories, the fat, and the sugar and grab yourself a Built bar. Now, let me tell you, if you don't know what the puffs are, it's literally a protein-infused marshmallow. Let that sink in. A protein-infused marshmallow. Who doesn't want that? They're so delicious. You really have to try them to believe them. So go head on over to Built.com and use our promo code. The promo code is LOCKEDON15. Promo code LOCKEDON15 gets you 15% off your next order at Built.com. Promo code LOCK15. 15% off your next order at Built.com. All right, you are listening to the Locked On NHL podcast. I'm Ross Levitan from Locked On Senators, alongside Mike DiStefano from Locked On Leafs. Have you had the Built Bar cookie dough chunk yet, Mikey? It is absolutely unreal.
Favorites, if not. Are we good?
Yeah, we're good. We're good.
Okay, yeah, it's one of my favorites. If not, That one, the churro one that they came out with was unbelievable. But this new it's so good.
It's
There's like 8
easily
different flavors that I truly adore. That grasshopper cookie one that they had too was so good.
the one I tried recently was pina colada. Like that's what I love about Built Bar. They literally keep coming out with new flavors all the time.
I took one of those with me on my trip. Literally,
Yes.
I literally took one of those with me on my trip. It was my pre-pina colada before getting on my cruise and going on my boat where I had multiple pina coladas.
Yes.
It was it just gave me a little boost of energy before getting on the boat. It's pretty sweet.
So impress your next party at home. And instead of, how they put the pineapple slice on the corner of a pina colada, just, take a little cut of a Built Bar pina colada and away you go. All right. That's neither here nor there. Later on, we're going to get to a few more remaining free agents. There are still a few big names. One in particular, a 40-goal scorer who still doesn't have a contract. But there's also, was he a 40-goal scorer this past year? Oh, no, he wasn't. No. The one who still is an RFA, I was trying to transition that into Tage Thompson. So close. Tage Thompson had 38 goals this past season in 78 games. So we could argue he was on pace for right around 40. But the Buffalo Sabres decided to lock him up to a 7-year, $50 million extension that pays him an average of 7.14. Now, a lot of people, rightfully so, are questioning this deal, saying he had one good year. He really only established himself as a full-time NHLer this year. His previous career high in points was 14. Yeah. This year he explodes for 68. Mikey, what was your thoughts when that deal came across the wire?
I was quite perplexed by it, especially when I found out that there was still 1 year left on that deal. Like, they didn't have to make that splash now. And my thing is, like, even if he goes off and he matches what he did last year and he has the 35 goal performance, is he really going to make more than $7 million?
Like, probably right around there. Now, I get that he's a bit of a unicorn.
So, like, how much are you really saving by doing that? And here's where you kind of get yourself stuck in a pickle is, what if last year was, like an aberration? What if last year was it? One big season and then, the NHL kind of figures him out. Or now that he's paid, which we've seen happen a lot, things change. And now all of a sudden you got $7 million on the books for a guy who's maybe a 2 or like a really good 3C, as opposed to last year where he was going on like a 1B type of output as a really solid two-way centerman. But I don't know. I thought it was really kind of premature to hand out somebody a contract like that, given the fact that he had one good season, and still had term left to wait it out and see if he could prove if last year was what he's going to be, or if that was just, a one-hit wonder. It remains to be seen. I hope not. Because to me, I thought Tage Thompson was last year's like most improved player. If there was a MIP, award, for most, I would have given it to Tage Thompson. Like, that guy really turned his career around. We were going on saying, "Wow, this was supposed to be the Ryan O'Reilly replacement in Buffalo, and he's become a bust. Wasn't even a legitimate NHLer." And then last year, boom, just absolutely went bananas. Hopefully he continues to do it. Like, I hope he has a great career. I just thought it was a little peculiar about the timing and why they decided to make that deal now as opposed to next summer.
Yeah, 38 goals, and all of them are catch and shoot, picking his spots. This guy is a bona fide sniper.
Oh yeah, he scored. I think he scored 4 or 5 goals on Toronto this year, so he was doing his damage within the division. I'm sure he sniped a couple on Ottawa too.
Oh yeah, I believe that. And he's got this unique frame too. You don't often see 6'7" centerman, 220 pounds. He's 24 years old, but I just didn't see the rush. And how much more was he going to make with another good year, right? Like, you look at Josh Norris, got paid almost $1 million more per season. He's also 2 years or a year and a half younger, but at the same time, like, they had to sign him. I wouldn't have been that comfortable with the Josh Norris deal if he had only done it once. We saw a little bit in the shortened season, a bit more at least than what Thompson, and he only got $800,000 more, and he needed a deal. So I just don't understand where the leverage was for Tage Thompson's camp to demand this much this soon?
I don't know. I guess they figure this is a player who we believe in. We want to invest in our future, and he's somebody who we believe we can kind of build around as part of our core. And we're going to do that. We're going to have Tage Thompson and Dylan Cousins be our 1-2 punch for years to come. So they decided to get him locked up long term. They didn't want to have to go into next season. And we've seen a situation where there've been when someone's in the type of situation that they could have been, where you're sitting there and what if they do end up in a contract stalemate, or he gets injured, or for whatever reason, they both decided, hey, if we want to get something done long-term right now, that could benefit us both, let's do it. We're both in the same boat here. It is just a little bit confusing as to why they decided to do it so early.
Yeah. Now the thing is, Buffalo does have a great young core coming up, and they'll all at some point need their cookies. So if they do believe that he's their number one center, and if he can produce like a number one center, then having him locked up at 7.1 for the next 7 years will look good.
Absolutely. But they also thought that about Jeff Skinner a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
When they shelled out $9 million to him. Now, he had a pretty good year actually last season alongside Tage Thompson, but still, he has not lived up to that contract. And the last 2 years since signing that deal have been putrid. So, sometimes you want to see more than one season if you can, and the Sabres certainly could have, which is, again, the reason why we're so confused.
Always love seeing young kids get paid, though, so I'm not going to blame the player, blame the game. 50 million sheets for Tage Thompson in Buffalo. Again, he didn't need a contract for another year, but there are still guys who need deals right now, or else they'll be holding out. We talked about Rasmus Sandin, but there's plenty other players, and one especially who we'll tell you about coming up right here on the Tuesday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. Don't go anywhere. You are listening to the Tuesday Eastern Conference edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. Alongside Mike DeStefano, I'm Ross Levitan, and will Jason Robertson miss games to start the season? The Dallas Stars were able to lock up Jake Ottinger to a very team-friendly deal. I believe it was 3 years at $4 million per season. But Jason Robertson got 40 goals last year. Exploded onto the scene after being nominated for the Calder Trophy the year before, only falling to a guy who is 4 years older than him in Kirill Kaprizov. No disrespect to a guy who is absolute stud, Kirill the Thrill. But Jason Robertson, what kind of contract do you think he ends up signing, especially after I played those comments from the Dallas Stars owner, from Andy and Strick?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they do decide to give him. I'm just looking on Cap Friendly right now, and it looks like they have $6.3-ish million to play with that they can give him. Now, I wonder if Tage Thompson's contract does anything here, right? I mean, if you're Jason Robertson, you're like, hey, 4 days ago, that guy just signed for $7.1 million. I put up 40 goals. He put up 38. I mean, I'm probably in that price range, somewhere in and around $7 million if you want to go long term. He could try for a bridge deal, and then try and double down on his RFA contract when the cap is expected to go up in a couple of seasons. But I would imagine he'll probably get somewhere between $6 and $7.5 million.
He's easily, though, the most crucial RFA yet to sign.
Oh, absolutely he is. That team's going to ride and die with Robertson. I mean, Sagan and Ben are a shell of what they used to be, right? I mean, their contracts are absurd. Sagan at 9.8, Ben at 9.5, but these are not top-line players anymore, despite, the letters on their jerseys and the cap hit that they're taken to the team. Now, Pavelski's coming off a really nice year, but 38 years old, going to be 39. Is he going to slide off a little bit? Hintz is a nice player for sure, but ultimately, Jason Robertson scored 40 goals for this team. It's a team that just barely squeaked into the playoffs. So if he's not there to start and he ends up coming in and they don't figure out a contract solution by training camp? What if it leaks into training camp? What if we have a Willie Nylander situation where he doesn't get to play until December, and then it'll take him like a month to get back into, the full swing? If you're Dallas, you got to figure out a way to get this guy signed. They actually are one of the few teams that have cap space right now too. I think they're they have the 6th most cap space in the NHL. Yeah, at $6.3 million. So, I mean, they can easily get something done. I'm not sure why they haven't yet.
Our friend Dane Lewis over at Locked On Stars is all in on them just paying the man. He said, you know what? What works out really well is paying the players who provide the most goals, which is something that the owner said that it's squeezing out the mid-level guys. But they don't make the playoffs without Jason Robertson last year coming up clutch down the stretch. There's a game, obviously, I'm based in Winnipeg. There's a game here. He had a hat trick, including the overtime winner, at a time where they were going back and forth in the Central Division, fighting for wild card positioning at that time. And he just came up clutch in so many big moments throughout last season. They have to find a way to get him signed before training camp. Outside of Jason Robertson.
Well, just really quickly.
Go ahead.
Really quickly, just like the difference between, because we are for them paying Robertson, whereas we just spent, 10 minutes prior talking about how we thought it was peculiar about Tage Thompson. And yes, they're the same age, similar in age, 23, 24 years old. The difference here is Jason Robertson has gone on to not only duplicate his successful rookie season, but took another step in his sophomore year and put up a 40-goal a year, which is what now you pay the guy, because he's proven that it wasn't just 1 year. Whereas now we're in this situation with Tage Thompson where we hope he takes that next step. And if he does, then good. I guess Buffalo, they were right on their gamble, and maybe it's going to turn out to be a great contract for years to come. But if they were wrong on the gamble, that's where it gets iffy. And they had the time to figure it out. Whereas Robertson, you don't have the time. Just sign the guy. He's if you don't get him signed, he's not going to be on your team. And he's shown the past 2 years that he's an elite player in this league. He can score goals. Scored 40 of them last year. So yeah, I would sign that guy in a heartbeat.
I like that, and I like that you brought up the progression even further, because the complete comparable would be if you signed Robertson to the Tage Thompson contract before he had his 40-goal year this year, and there would have been eyebrows lifted. Even though he was second in Calder voting there, that's still a lot of term to be given a guy. But if he signs that deal, I'd say it's probably fair for both sides at this point. If not, you'd probably be like, you know what? I think the team probably did pretty well coming out if he does sign for about 7-1 on a 7-year term. But I think it's more likely, just like we saw with Jake Ottinger, take the bridge. And you know what? There's an aging core there in Dallas. A lot of guys who are signed. I think 3 years left on Ryan Suter at 3.65 as well. 3 years left for Esa Lindell. He's a guy you probably re-sign, but maybe to a lower number once he hits that 31 plateau. So maybe you do 3 years at 6.5, something like that with Jason Robertson. But they need to get him signed. There's no question about that if they want to have any success this year. What I was starting to ask you, though, Mikey, who's next on your most important free agent list?
So if I'm looking at the guys who are still out there and still available, the biggest name I would say is probably Kirby Dach, if I had to give one of these names, just because he just got traded, right? He moved. He's a former 3rd overall pick, first of all, but then moved from Chicago to Montreal this past summer at the draft. And it was a pretty sizable deal.
For a 13th overall pick. So he's already gone down 10 picks in terms of value. It was a bit of a 3-way trade, right? They got the 13th overall pick for Alexander Romanov and then flipped it right away to Chicago.
Right. But still, I still think that he is, they're hoping that he can be kind of their second line center at some point in behind Nick Suzuki, right? So I think they want him to be the guy. And obviously Kirby Dach, he's dealt with some injuries so far early in his career and hasn't quite lived up to the potential that, maybe they thought he would, or were hoping that he would when he was taken 3rd overall by the Chicago Blackhawks. But maybe a change in scenery and a different organization, different team, he can finally, reach that, that status that he was hoping to be as a top 6 bona fide power forward type of centerman. So I'd say that he probably would be the next man up on my power rankings, I guess, if you want to call it that, in terms of RFAs that have yet to sign.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. The only thing that sucks with Doc is he got hurt at Team Canada camp, didn't he, at the World Juniors?
A couple years ago.
Yeah,
Right?
he was supposed to be captain of that team,
Yeah.
and he just hasn't really looked the same. Like, pace has never been his strong suit. He's got great hands, power forward, but it sucks that that an injury at an international event seems to have taken a step back in his development overall.
Yeah.
Because you would have thought, like, learning from Jonathan Taves in Chicago would have been such a perfect situation for him, and it didn't even last 2.5.
Well,
I guess with the canceled year,
Well,
barely
Taves
lasted
didn't
2
play that
seasons.
year either.
Right.
So they probably
Wow.
barely played with each other. I guess they would play last year, but the year before, Taves didn't play, and the year before that, he got injured.
Wow.
So,
That's too bad. If I'm looking somewhere, though, Mikey, it's Sean Dursey with the Los Angeles Kings, a bit of an undercover player there. Drafted by the Leafs. He was in the Jake Muzzin trade, was he not?
Yep, he sure was. Was it the Muzzin or the Cam? Yeah, it was the Jake Muzzin trade. Yeah, was it Muzzin or Cam?
Nice player, man.
No,
He's a nice player, and the LA Kings don't pay a whole lot of money to their decor outside of course, $11 million to Drew Doughty. But beyond that, they've got Matt Roy making 3.1, and then Sean Walker making 2.65, and he was on the IR for the better part of last season as well. And with those injuries, who stepped up but Sean Dursey as a first-year NHLer, 64 games, 27 points, had a 55% Corsi. So obviously shot share was in the Kings' favor when he's on the ice. I just don't know why they can't get a quick little, I don't know, 3-year, $6 million total, pay him 2 point something if you have to, and just get the deal done, because I don't know what the health is like for Sean Walker right now elsewhere, but that decor, and we know Drew Doughty missed a big portion of last season, only playing in 39 games, albeit solid 39 games, a bit of a bounce back after 3 tough years for Drew Doughty, but he's not getting any younger either. I think that this is a team that's ready to take a step, going out, getting Fiala, really supplementing their offense. You're hoping Quentin Byfield can take a big step. They've got some other offensive weapons who I think they hope can take another step, like Alex Turcotte's another guy who you're hoping is going to get to the next level as well. So I think that there's too much at stake for the LA Kings season to go into it without one of their top 4 defensemen.
I completely agree, man. Like I am quite surprised that they've gone this long and they haven't been able to figure it out. Him and Michael Anderson, both those guys who played a role with this team last year. So I think Dursey, I don't know. Do you think $2 million is enough, like on a multi-year deal? I feel like he's going to want a little bit more than that.
Who do you think gets paid more then, him or Mikey Anderson? It's got to be Dursey, because he provides the offense too.
I would say Dursey. I just don't know if he goes like 3 years at $2 million. He might take a 1 year and then kind of renegotiate next season. But I don't know if he'd lock himself up until he's 26 years old at that cheap contract, considering that I think he is a bet on himself type of guy, perhaps. And, you know, seeing the progression that he made last year, if he could do that again this year, I mean, I think he's making a lot more money than $2 million next season and the season after that. So if I were him, I don't know if I would try and lock myself into a long-term contract that, unless it's for a heftier price tag than $2 million, maybe 3-ish, maybe would be enough to entice me. But I think 2 seems a little low on a multi-year deal. A 1 year, get it done. Let's see what you can do. Can you follow it up? Type of contract. I like that number at $2 million. But with term on it, I think he'd want a little bit more.
Yeah, fair enough. Again, pivotal season for the LA Kings. Last guy who I have to bring up, I mean, you saw him from your neck of the woods playing the OHL, or at least down that way. Member of the London Knights, and then from the Ottawa Senators, Alex Formington. Had 18 goals last year. Kind of a breakout. He was unreal in the AHL right before the pandemic. 27 goals as a rookie down in Belleville. But, of course, there's the investigation going on with Team Canada 2018 World Junior Team. No names have come out. No real update outside of Bill Daly saying he doesn't think that it's going to be complete by the start of the season. Again, without saying that he's guilty, without saying that he's innocent, there's been no names, and I'm not of the mind that we should be speculating until there are, because, again, 8 players allegedly were involved in a heinous crime. And I'm pretty against those guys being a part of the National Hockey League, but there's also 23 guys on the team. The facts will come out, but do you think that the investigation is playing a role with him not being signed as of now?
Probably. Again, I feel like this is one that you would be more so in your wheelhouse, just being a Sens beat guy with Locked On Sens. But, you would think that Formington's a guy who they'd like to get signed and be part of that core long term. It sounded as though they thought he would be kind of part of that, secondary level, scoring, especially now that they've moved on from a guy like Connor Brown. So I think maybe they want to figure out, or maybe there's some more news that'll come out, or they have some more, some more work that they have to do, check see what's going on. It's tough to talk about without speculating, but ultimately, I would imagine that could be why he hasn't signed anything quite yet.
No, I totally understand that, and I'm on the same boat. The only thing that made me raise an eyebrow where I was like, is Alex Formington potentially trade bait no matter what outside circumstances could be, is when they went out and acquired Mathieu Joseph, who's a similar type player, like brings speed, brings penalty killing, and has a little bit of offensive touch to him as well. It almost felt like they were kind of bringing in a guy to replace him at the same time.
Yeah, but then I guess when you move out Connor Brown, that created another hole that Formington or Joseph could fill in, no?
To an extent, because then they went out and got Claude Giroux to be that right wing on the top six. So Connor Brown was playing top six, although I think in a perfect world, he's probably a third liner. Yeah. But will he get paid like a third liner, or will he be like a Zach Hyman, where in free agency, those types of players are coveted and will get paid beyond what the typical third liner gets? And then Joseph just signed for 4 years at 2.95, under $3 million. There's no way Connor Brown, who was already making 3.6, was going to make that as a third line player. So now you feel like you've replaced that production at less cost on the third line. And then, I mean, there's deeper things that I feel like should stay at Locked On Senders in terms of who could be the left winger on that third line. But all of a sudden, I think it does open up the possibility that, hey, you need to go get a top four defenseman. Formington does have a ton of potential. I would like to see it in Ottawa, but he could be a guy that has value in a trade as well.
One last guy who I think maybe I want to chat about really quickly is Barrett Ayton, taken 5th overall a couple of years ago. Passed up Quinn Hughes. Arizona did to take Barrett Ayton in that draft. Tough. But, he's a guy who hasn't really established himself in the NHL quite yet. Last year did end up, I guess, with a career-high 60 points. Played a majority of the season in the National Hockey League, but
60 games.
60 games, only scored 24 points, 10 of which being goals through 60 games. So, 94 games into his career, he's got 31 points in his NHL career. So, I'm curious if you think that if he has a chance to, I guess, still make it with Arizona, or has he made it to that point as a prospect where he would be better off, if he wants to make it in the NHL, better off in a different organization? Would a change of scenery maybe be best for Barrett Ayton, and that could be playing a role into why he hasn't signed yet in Arizona?
What's with the Arizona Coyotes and high picks that don't work out at center, right? Like Kyle Turris comes right to mind as well, 3rd overall, and he needed a fresh scenery before he started. Dylan Strome again. These centermen, they don't seem to do well there. I fell in love with Barrett Ayton when he played the final of the World Juniors with one shoulder and still scored on a one-timer. Like this guy, he was all heart and soul. I think he was the captain of that team, right? It was
he was.
The last tournament right before the pandemic, and the Coyotes had to let him go. I think he was playing. Was he playing AHL at the time? Yeah, he was playing with Tucson. He had 20 games in the NHL, 5 games in the AHL. And you're like, okay, he's off to a bit of a start of his career. I mean, the NHL numbers weren't quite there, but in the AHL he produced at the World Juniors, 12 points in 7 games. That was an amazing gold medal game there as well. And then it just seemed to fall apart, maybe with the pandemic, his development curve, whatever it was. But I hope the best for this kid because, he put on an electric performance at that tournament. And I know it's a short sample size, but he seemed to be the type of do-it-all centerman. And Had a bit of punch to his game as well. Could shoot the puck, could dish it. So I don't know why it hasn't worked, but Dylan Strome did find another gear. I'm not saying he ended up being third overall pick value, but he certainly found another gear once he got to a new circumstance.
Well, I've always made the joke gets made quite often here in Leaf circles about the, Sault Ste. Marie Maple Leafs.
Yep.
Barrett Ayton, former Sault Ste. Marie Greyhound, potentially. I don't know why I think about this, but like potentially that could be a buy low candidate for the Maple Leafs, who don't really have center depth, and see if they can uncover that potential that was in there. That a lot of teams saw when he was junior, enough to go top 5 in the NHL draft, and be captain of Team Canada at the World Junior Championships. I've recently been thinking about maybe Toronto making a play at Barrett Ayton.
Would you swap Sandin and a pick for him?
I thought about it. I don't even know if you'd have to give up a pick though, because Sandin's actually played he's given you quality NHL minutes when he's played. The problem is it's a numbers game, right? Like he just kind of gets pushed out based on the fact that who are you going to sit out? You're not going to sit out Riley, Muzzin, or Giordano ahead of him, right on the depth chart. So that's why he becomes an interesting trade bait. I don't know if I'd be willing to go there just because I know Sandin is an NHL player. I don't know if Barrett Ayton is an NHL player. He hasn't shown it to me yet, at the very least. But it might be something that I would be considering at the very least if I was Toronto. Try and see if they can uncover something and, try and get yourself a young pivot, because they don't really have anyone. I think their best centerman is they just took a kid, Fraser Minton, in the second round. But again, he's more of a bottom 6 centerman. Then they got Roni Hirvonen, who's an undersized centerman who probably, I don't know, maybe will end up getting pushed out to the wing if he even makes a dent in the NHL. Maybe Hayton's the type of player that they could go after. I think I'm going to talk about that this week on Locked On Leafs, by the way. I'll go a little more in depth into it over on my show.
Well, we're looking forward to hearing that. Again, you can tune in on Locked On Leafs, and make sure you make another Locked On NHL show your second listen of the day. We appreciate you making Locked On NHL your first listen of the day each and every weekday with different local hosts each and every show. So you're basically getting 5 shows in one when you subscribe to the Locked On NHL podcast. For Mike DiStefano, I'm Ross Levitan. The next time we do this, Mikey, rookies will be reporting ahead of the rookie showcase in Buffalo, where the Ottawa Senators will do that. Wait, where are the Leafs going? Are the Leafs going to be in Buffalo as well?
Typically they're like in Traverse City, to be honest with you. They go
because I think Ottawa's playing. I've got it right here. Ottawa's taking on Boston on Friday, Montreal on Sunday, and Buffalo on Monday. So no Leafs, at least.
No, the Leafs typically do theirs in Traverse City with Detroit, and I think Carolina goes typically. What's it looking like here? It's not showing me, of course, the other teams. But, yeah, it's going to be in Traverse City. Oh, there it is. St. Louis, Columbus, and Detroit.
All right.
So, yeah.
There you go. Well, next week we'll talk some rookies, and we'll tee up the NHL season coming right up. So, for Mike DiStefano, I'm Ross Levitan. Until next week, this has been the Locked On NHL podcast, your team every day.